At the end of 2020, approximately 10 million renters were behind on their rent, for a total of approximately $57.3 billion. In order to combat this problem, on December 27, 2020, President Donald Trump signed into law the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which appropriated $25 billion in federal funds toward rental and utility assistance. The money was distributed to all states and local governments which have populations of 200,000 residents or more in January of 2021. On March 11, 2021, President Joe Biden signed into law the American Rescue Plan, which included an additional $21.55 billion in additional emergency rental assistance. That money was also distributed to states and local governments, who quickly and efficiently turned it around, paid it to all of the eligible applicants, and thereby averted the housing and financial crisis that was looming. What? They didn't actually do that yet? Oh. Half of them are not even accepting applications as of April 1st? Okay. Right. We should talk about this. Hey guys, my name is Vitaly Volpov. I'm a practicing attorney, an active real estate investor, and a part owner of a real estate brokerage in upstate New York. On this channel, I discuss relevant legal concepts as well as best strategies and tips for real estate investing and personal finance. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so that YouTube notifies you of all my future content. If you enjoy the content in this video, hit the like button and comment down below. And as always, whenever I'm discussing legal concepts, just remember, nothing that I say should be construed as legal or financial advice. I provide this information for educational and entertainment purposes only, and you should always consult with your own advisor and your own attorney before making any legal or financial decisions. Last but not least, the views and opinions that I express in this video are my own alone and don't necessarily reflect those of my law firm or any of my business partners. So before I talk about the reasons of why this has taken so long, let's first get on the same page as to how this process is supposed to work. It starts with the federal government appropriating a certain amount of money, in this case $25 billion the first round and $21.55 billion in the second round. That first $25 billion was distributed to the states as well as local governments who applied and who were eligible to receive this funding by virtue of having at least 200,000 residents residing in their localities. Once this money was received by states and local governments, then it was up to them to create systems and processes and application portals and application programs to process this funding and make sure that it's going to eligible applicants. And this is where we have seen substantial delays. As I mentioned in the intro of this video, approximately half of all recipients of this grant funding on the state and local level have not even begun accepting applications or handing out any of this money. This is despite the first $25 billion having been fully distributed to them by the end of January 2021. I'm making this video on April 1st, 2021, and so it has been at least 2 months since all of these states and local governments have received their funding. Over the last several weeks, I've done substantial research to figure out which counties and which states and which local governments have begun accepting applications and which ones haven't. I'm currently working on a free guide to each state's and each local government's emergency rental assistance program. This guide will contain short descriptions and will also have links to each state and each local government's emergency rental assistance program, which you can simply click on. It will take you to their website and you will be able to apply if you are in that jurisdiction. I expect to have this guide complete in the very near future, and I will put a link to it in the description to this video, as well as a few other videos that I have currently planned. So why are so many states and local governments not yet accepting applications, even though it has been at least 2 months since they received the funding? Well, one reason for this is the lack of infrastructure. As I mentioned in the beginning, there are at least 10 million potential applicants who are behind on their rent. That's at least 10 million applications across the country that these governments are supposed to process. The most efficient way to do this is through an online portal. However, a lot of states and local governments do not have online portals already set up for this type of purpose. So they have to essentially build them from the ground up in many cases. And if they don't have the technical expertise or the ability to do so, they have to outsource it to an outside organization. When it comes to outsourcing to an outside organization, local governments and states have to go through a bidding process. They can't simply select a contractor they think they like. They have to actually put it out to a public bid, which would allow various organizations to compete for this contract. There's usually a timeline associated with this where those contractors and organizations who are interested are given a deadline by which they're supposed to submit their bids, provide their pricing, explain what they're going to be able to do for the state or the local government, and then the local government will collect all those applications and decide which one is the lowest price and also the one that is most compatible for their needs. Again, this process takes a long time, potentially weeks or even months, which contributes to the delay. Once the contractor is chosen, then that contractor can begin their work, which may also take a few weeks or maybe months to complete and set up. So we're talking about at least several weeks or maybe several months that this process can take when a state or local government is outsourcing this type of work. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is a lack of staffing. Even if a state believes that it has the sufficient infrastructure and the know-how to handle this type of a program or online portal, it still needs individuals to review each application. Many times, the states and local governments simply do not have existing staff to handle this many applications all at once. If a county is expecting 150,000 applications to come in, let's say, but they have a department of only 10 or 15 employees that will be handling those applications, you can see how this is going to take them a really long time to process them. There are very nuanced eligibility requirements with this program, as well as substantial requirements to provide documentation, all of which needs to be reviewed. In many cases, the reviewers of each application have to look at several different things, including income information that is provided by the tenant, as well as landlord information, as well as the lease and various notices showing that the tenant is in default or that they're qualified or that they received unemployment. And there are many different factors that each reviewer has to take into account in order to decide whether this particular applicant is eligible for the emergency rental assistance. Even if each application takes a reviewer only 5 minutes to review, they would only be able to review 12 applications per hour. In an 8-hour day, they would only be able to get through 96 applications. If a county is expecting 150,000 applications to come in, you can see how this process can take reviewers many months to complete. Hiring additional staff would obviously help in this case and speed up the process. However, hiring takes time. Those individuals would also need to be trained on how to do the job, and again, that results in additional delays. The third reason is, of course, politics. When it comes to the federal government providing relief funding to states or local governments, politics always comes into play. Democrats and Republicans often have competing agendas. Not only do they battle over how the funding is supposed to be distributed and what eligibility criteria they're supposed to use, even though federal law already tells them what they are, but they also argue over what pet projects and programs they want to shoehorn together with this rental assistance. One of the prime examples of this is my home state of New York. One of the things that the progressive Democrats wanted to cram into the legislation that would authorize the state to distribute this funding was a for-cause eviction requirement. If you're not familiar with it, a for-cause eviction requirement would prohibit landlords from refusing to renew a tenant's lease when that lease expires, essentially creating perpetual leases in New York. If this law were to pass, then the only way landlords can end a tenant's lease would be if the tenant did something wrong in violating the lease, or when the eviction bans are eventually lifted, failed to pay their rent. That would be a for-cause type of eviction. There wouldn't be any more holdover evictions if this law were to pass. So the Democrats wanted to put this provision into the authorization bill that would authorize the emergency rental assistance funding, which of course has nothing to do with emergency rental assistance funding provided by the federal government. This created a lot of debate and delay even inside the Democratic Party in New York because a lot of those Democrats had constituents who were opposed to this law. Additionally, our esteemed governor, Governor Cuomo, hasn't exactly been focused on this issue as he's been a little distracted with other things. Just yesterday, a group of Republican state lawmakers held a press conference as well as authored a letter to Governor Cuomo, chiding him for failing to move this program along and criticizing him for holding up the $1.3 billion in rent relief that was received from the federal government by New York State. Despite this public pressure, it remains to be seen exactly when the state of New York is actually going to open this program. The agency that is set to be in charge of this program has had the same message on its website since February 19th, saying that they're still working on it. Hopefully by the time this video is released, the public pressure is actually going to have some effect and we will see the program open. Similarly, approximately a dozen or so counties in New York have separately received funding from the federal government and have ostensibly sat on it since January 2021. From what I'm hearing, they're waiting for the state to take the lead, and so they're sitting on their funding as well. Of course, this is not just a New York State issue, as other states have had the same problems as well. For example, in the state of Illinois, the Democrats and the Republicans disagreed as to what should go into the state law releasing the emergency rental assistance funds. In that state, Republicans wanted to include a provision which would remove the eviction ban protections from those tenants in that state who were abusing the privilege of the eviction ban. So under that proposal, those tenants who were being opportunistic and just taking advantage of the eviction ban and not paying their rent even though they could would no longer be protected. Sounds like a pretty sensible and reasonable proposal, but what do I know? I'm just a landlord. Of course, the Democrats in that state disagreed, and that led to some additional delays in releasing the funding in that state. So the bottom line here is that state and local governments need to move as quickly as possible to get this money to people who need it. No more unnecessary delays, no more bureaucratic nonsense. There are 10 million renters who are facing eviction who are behind on their rent right now. There are also hundreds of thousands of landlords who are behind on their mortgages, utilities, and taxes. They need your help right now. No more excuses. Get this done. You've had the money for months now. You have to get it to people who need it. And if you're a tenant or a landlord who's waiting for your state or local government to open their application program, you need to let your local officials and state officials know. Let them know that you need this money now. This is critical. This needs to happen today. So with that said, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you again for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments for me, drop them in the comments down below. Let me know what state and what municipality you're watching from. Let me also know whether your state or local government has opened its application program. If you guys like this video, if you enjoyed it, do me a favor and hit the like button. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, definitely subscribe so that you don't miss any of my future videos. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.